You know,
No,
like
it's-
maybe you want to do it every 3 weeks or whatever it is.
No,
Live, though.
anytime.
Okay.
Anytime.
I
You
will
can
tell
just-
you next
You
time.
can literally walk up to me and go, what's the matter with you?
We're talking about
Are we live now?
Cyril Kellett's
you're live.
No, we're not. We're not.
haircut.
We're not talking about
It
that
looks
anymore.
really nice.
Hi, everybody on the internets. I am Cy Kellett, the host of Catholic Answers Live, and sometimes we come in here before the show into the studio and we do a little thing called Catholic Answers More. Jimmy Akin named it Catholic Answers More, and we're scared to change the title, frankly, because but no, that's it has stuck, and so Catholic Answers More means we do a little bit more. But this time, I invited into the studio. Well, did I invite you all, or did you all invite me? I can't remember now.
You invited us.
Did I invite you?
Yeah.
All
I
right.
invited myself.
I didn't.
I mean,
And your name is?
Jesus invited her.
I invited 3 or 4 of the women here at Catholic Answers to come by and talk about that thing right there. To talk-
Veils.
do we call it a veil? Do we call it mantilla? What do we say?
I
What?
say veil.
yeah, I say veil too.
Uh-huh.
We're neither are.
Is it the same thing?
I don't speak Spanish, so I
Oh,
say veil.
okay.
No hablo español.
Well, and
I say veil.
so let me introduce both of them. This woman here to my right is assistant producer Marie, and what we were talking about when we came on right now was the fact that Marie has a job she has not been doing, but we will not do a critique of your job performance on air. Hello,
Thank
Marie.
you. Hi.
And joining Marie is
Emily
executive-
Sanchez.
What would I always say? Executive assistant or executive assistant to the
yeah.
president.
All the above.
Yes.
Emily Sanchez, sister of Rose and many other people. How many?
Sister of Rose.
I have 8
I love
siblings.
it.
You have 8 siblings. Yes, Rose being the
Yes.
youngest, who I just met the other day.
And the cutest.
She is so cute.
I would dispute that because I don't think she liked me. So I'm going to say right off the
Like
bat
you,
that
she's reserved.
she's reserved. I think she was like, this
You're
guy's
scary, you
Yeah,
know?
she looked at me like, you are a complete clown. I want nothing to do with you.
She looks
But-
at everyone like that.
Does she? Really? I thought she was judging
Probably
me.
takes
I thought-
time to warm up.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's a very cute, charming person, but I
She
have very
is.
negative feelings.
I'm sure too.
We'll have to bring her back in.
Yeah, we can bring Rose in sometime, but she's going to have to be nice to me next time. Okay, so in the mornings here at Catholic Answers, at about 8:30 in the morning, 11:30 Mondays,
Yep.
because it's hard to get Marie up and in here on Mondays.
Yeah.
So did you know
Yeah,
it?
same.
She's almost. Well, no, we won't talk about that. Okay.
Stop.
Marie,
we go to
man,
mass. Okay,
come
so
on.
we have
I was late today. Okay.
8:30 mass in the morning. Mm-hmm. The reason why it's important that she was late is she was on the air. You can't be late to be on the air.
I
That's my-
co-hosted my first show today.
Oh my gosh, how did it go?
It was
I didn't know
amazing.
that.
She did a
It
really
was
good job.
It was fun.
But she is a true pro. She
Solid.
just ran in right before the show started.
It was 2 minutes
right.
before, but in my defense, I hit every red light in this city. So.
Yeah, it was the red lights that kept you on to
two
the
of them.
topic for today. So I want to
All
talk
right.
to you about the fact that when I go to Mass, none of the men in this building wear a veil.
That's a good thing.
And some of the women do. Not all of the women wear a veil to Mass.
I think
and I
3 of us.
I
Yeah.
have
Or 4,
noticed, or
maybe.
maybe 4. Maybe 4. But we have guests
4.
who come too. But I've noticed that it tends to be younger women who wear the veil. So I thought, I want to do a Catholic Answers More where I ask, why do they wear it? What is the thinking
Yeah.
there? And what does it mean? And I have a theory about why you all do, but maybe I should hear from you first before I share my theory.
Okay.
I'll
I
tell
think Emily actually has a really interesting observation about younger women wearing veils now that she kind of shared with me.
Yeah,
Would you want to
so-
talk about that?
Well, just briefly, like I started wearing a veil about 8 years ago, and I was because I went to a parish where everyone wore veils, and so I kind of did it because everybody else was doing it.
Oh, okay.
And the first couple days was awkward because it's falling down and stuff. And I mean, we don't wear hats nowadays
Right.
that often, so it was weird. But then it immediately just helped me to pray and
Oh.
to focus. So when I put it on, I'm immediately like, okay, something important is happening and I can just pray. So, but I was telling Marie that we would, bounce around sometimes and go to other parishes. And so I would still wear my veil because it still helped me to pray. And I felt awkward about it at first.
Oh.
And so it took a little while, because you feel like you're standing out. But then I started to realize over the past 8 years that so many other young women are now wearing veils.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a growing trend right now. And And it was cool. I was telling her about, I went to Steubenville youth conferences here in San Diego 8 years ago, and there's 5,000 girls or 5,000 people, and out of those 5,000 people, there's maybe a handful of other girls wearing veils. But then recently, I went to a big women's youth conference, and out of the 300 women there were probably like 25 to 30 women wearing veils. So you can see that it's just growing. The numbers are growing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you went. May I guess that the parish that you went to, where everyone seemed to be wearing veils, they were celebrating the older
Trinity?
form of the Mass.
That's right.
I don't know what I'm supposed to say. The extraordinary form. I always forget the words. Which is probably going to get me in trouble with somebody, but I'm not good with remembering words. What am I,
We're
a
doing
radio
our
host?
best here.
Okay, so you started wearing the veil when and why?
Not as long as Emily. I think in college I got my first veil, so maybe 5 years ago, but I didn't wear it consistently because I felt so on the spot, and nobody else wore one at my college, really. I remember one other girl who did on a regular basis, and I almost felt like it was more of a distraction for me at that point because I was so focused on what everybody else was thinking. And so I kind of put it to the side for a while, but when I graduated from school, I found the same thing, that it helped me to focus.
Really?
And that it made me feel like I was humbling myself before God. Like I don't deserve to be in God's presence. He's God, but veiling kind of puts you into this mindset of humility, I think, that prepares you for the liturgy, which is pretty nice. And I don't think everybody feels the same about veils that we do. I think a lot of people worship in a perfectly good way without one.
Yeah.
But
do you think maybe that for women like of my age, it might mean something different?
I'm sorry.
Why is that funny? Because they're very old if they're my age?
Do you know what?
I agree with you, Sai. Actually, I think that people who are a generation above us, they going through the time of the Second Vatican Council. When women had to wear veils, and then they were allowed not to wear veils, it was this kind of act of, okay, we're free to pray how we want to pray.
Yeah.
And so I think that there can be a negative connotation with a veil, as though like a veil is enslaving you, or a veil is dragging you down, and now you're free to pray without one.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of beauty to wearing a veil that isn't isn't attached to being something that's weighing you down. Rather, like Marie was saying, for me, I think of it as a sign of respect, that you're able to just wear this sign of respect for our Lord as you're praying.
Yeah.
And I think that it is hard. I've definitely gotten kind of funny looks from older women. Like,
Yeah, because
why do you wear that? Like, we're free from that now, But
and I think you're right. It was just a different time. But something else too is that Emily's in particular, it's your grandmother's?
It's my great aunts.
Great aunts.
So I have her veil.
And both of our veils are special to us in different ways, and I think for me, it makes me feel more beautiful in front of God. I mean, I put on this beautiful thing to represent where I am, to say, like, I'm in God's presence, and so I prepare myself differently than in any other space.
Now, see, this comes to my theory about why you all wear the veil, and that is, I have a theory about young women that they like to wear pretty things, and these are extremely beautiful.
We do.
Is it possible?
Is he wrong?
You're not wrong. I mean, I don't know if that's the whole story.
That's definitely. I like to wear pretty things.
Yeah.
But I feel like there is this also this thing with the older Mass, the extraordinary form, the Mass in Latin, that for your generation it doesn't mean what it meant to my generation. That there's a way in which it was like kind of a liturgy battleground through the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like it's a battleground so much anymore. And I kind of feel, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to know if this is the case. I kind of feel like people of your generation, young men and women, want to be distinctively Catholic, like want real signs that this is not like the rest of the world. This is very Catholic. Am I in the ballpark, or?
I would totally agree with you. I mean, I think that it's mixed. Definitely, there's obviously the church is universal, and there's a lot of different people in different places, as far as it being a battleground or not. But I would agree with you that I love the smells and bells. I love, being very, prominently Catholic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think veils are super hipster. I think the Latin Mass is hipster, It's cool.
And it's kind of like
I
if
wonder
you're
how
gonna,
Pope Benedict would feel about that.
if you're
He would
going
like
to
it.
be Catholic, yeah, you want to do it 100%, which might not mean the veil for you, or it might not mean the Latin Mass. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't,
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
attend the Latin Mass, but being Catholic, being authentically Catholic, definitely you've hit that.
What about when we have the Latin Mass here? Do you go to that?
I
or-
enjoy it. No,
Oh.
and I've gone to St. Anne's before a few times,
Yeah.
but it's just not my parish that I go to. But
Oh, I see. I gotcha.
yeah, one other thing that I guess was inspiration for me to wear the veil was that the Jewish tradition of covering your head. The whole idea behind that is knowing that there's someone above you watching
Yeah.
and viewing your life, and it's good to remind yourself that there's someone above who's watching over us.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And when you feel that physical sign, it's helpful.
All right. Now, do you, because you wear the veil when you go to Mass, do you feel like you judge other women who don't? Like you go, oh, they are not.
Not at
as good
all.
Totally
Really?
not.
You don't?
Yeah.
No.
I see. All right.
I mean, I think
It's-
there's a fear of, occupying yourself too much with feeling like you're being judged by other people.
Oh, really?
Like, I feel like that's something that most people who wear a veil have to go through. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want people to be thinking like, oh, holier than thou. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
that's the problem that I find. I would never think to judge somebody else for not wearing
Wearing a veil is no indication of your
one.
holiness.
No way. It's like, we're trying harder right now. We need this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it could, like, if you go into a parish, say, where there's not very many people wearing the veil, then you feel self-conscious, like, oh, I'm the sore thumb sticking out.
I think over time it goes away and it just becomes like, you're in that space with God, and that, it's other people are praying in their way and you're praying in your way, and it's all part of the same beautiful Mass.
So if you are blessed with children, say you have little girls, what are you going to say to them about the veil?
I would probably give them a choice. I don't
Yeah,
know. If
good question.
If I was a part of what is the term, Tridentine or Latin parish?
Latin Mass, I don't know.
And I probably would have my girls wear it because that's the custom there.
I feel like I probably won't say anything.
Just see
And
what
I'll
they do.
just wear one, and then I'll see if they want to wear one.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll say, Mommy, why do you get to wear that, or why do you have to wear that? I'll bet they say, why do you get to wear that?
Yeah. If they see
Yeah.
me loving it, then I feel like kids usually love what their parents love. So if they
And-
see me love it, they'll do it, but I would never force my kids
Like
to wear
you
it.
said, girls like wearing beautiful things. So if they see a beautiful veil, they might want
Yeah.
one too. Yeah.
All right, will you say goodbye to everybody on the internet?
Bye,
By
guys.
name.
Thank
No,
you.
by name, please.
Oh.
Bye, Bob.
Bye,
and
everybody.
Bye, Frank.
Bye, Bob. Bye,
Bye,
Nancy.
Steve.
We
Bye,
love you.
John.
Bye,
Bye.
Brad.
Bye.
I'm trying to remember all the Facebook people. Bye.
Well, you better say Margot then.
Bye, Margot.
See you soon.
Thank you both.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of Catholic Answers Live. Thank you so much for being with us. I am Cy Kellett, your host, joined in studio by Jimmy Aiken this hour. We're going to give you a bonus hour of open forum today. Second hour, Dr. Ray Guarendi will be here to talk about his brand new book, Thinking Like Jesus. Looking forward to talking with Dr. Ray. It's a little wild around here at Catholic Answers this week. I noticed wagon loads of books and DVDs and things leaving the building, and banners and all this stuff. Erica, who organizes the conference, is I am just staying out of her way as she directs traffic, trying not to bother her because it's conference week. So Thursday, I hope you'll join us for our conference. We'll be live on the air from the floor of the conference doing this program. And then Friday, we'll be doing it live from the conference again. It's a conference on faith and science. We're expecting about 900 of our very best friends to be there. And you can be there via radio. Join us then. As I said, Jimmy Akin came in special to do a 1 hour of open forum with us today. Jimmy, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you, Cy?
Really, really well. Thanks. You ready for your conference talk?
I'm still putting the finishing touches on it, but yeah.
The part, the fireworks and the part where you pull rabbits out of a hat and all that. You still got to practice.
Mostly just slides for keynotes.
Slides. Okay. What does that mean? Slides for keynote. So like you're making a point. And
I'm using. So people have probably heard of PowerPoint, which is a Microsoft-based presentation software, where you have slides and you click between them to illustrate what you're talking about. Keynote's the same thing for the Mac operating system.
Oh, I see. I got it. I just assumed it was PowerPoint. I hadn't heard of Keynote before. Jimmy is the author, by the way, of a whole bunch of books, including A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist. And he's got a brand new book coming out just weeks away. Maybe we'll get it. If you have any questions about authority in the Catholic Church and how we know what level of authority the various teachings of the Catholic Church have, that's what the book covers, and you can present Jimmy with one or two of those questions today. We'd love to get them. Again, the number 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And tell me the title of the book again, because I get it backwards.
Teaching with Authority.
Teaching with Authority. Yep.
Yeah. So it's going to tell you about the magisterium, how it operates, how to read magisterial documents. This is a question that a lot of people don't really have much of a clue about and I didn't originally, because there's a certain skill that goes into figuring out what they're saying and what they're not saying.
Yeah,
because it's very important to ask that follow-up question, what are they not saying here? Right. And it's very easy to read something and jump to conclusions about what it means, in part also because they use a kind of special vocabulary in how they express things, and if you're not familiar with the meaning of terms, and even if you're not familiar with what a term means at a particular point in history, like heresy.
Oh, I see.
Heresy did not always mean what it means today. Neither did dogma. And so the meaning of those terms have evolved over time. So if you take a document, say, from the 400s, and it says, well, this is a heresy, it may not mean this is a heresy in the modern sense.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
And similarly, I go into what's the difference between a doctrine and a dogma? What's the difference between doctrine and theology? Because there is a difference. Not all teachings or doctrines are mandatory. I'm about to say that backwards. Not all theological views amount to doctrines or teachings of the church. There are a lot of theological views that are just, this is a theological opinion. You can hold it if you think the evidence supports it, or not hold it if you don't.
Again, 888-318-7884, the number if you'd like to speak with Jimmy about anything, any question that has to do with the life, the faith, the history of the Catholic Church. It's all welcome during this hour of open forum, 888-318-7884. Many people will hear the words magisterial documents, and it sounds like majestic, but that's not where it comes from.
No, the word magister in Latin means teacher, and so magisterium is the teaching authority that Christ gave his church, and the Pope and the bishops exercise that teaching authority. So collectively, they're also called the magisterium. And a magisterial document is a document written by someone or issued by someone who's a member of the magisterium, either a pope or a bishop or a group of bishops or something like that, that they've authorized as official church teaching.
Okay, so that's the we kind of use it as a noun. That's the magisterium of the church, meaning that's the teaching of the church.
Teaching authority of the church, yeah.
I see. Okay.
The word magisterium can have several meanings. It can mean the person, the teacher.
Okay.
Well, magister is that, but then we can talk about the personal magisterium of John Paul II. meaning all the stuff that he taught. Magisterium also can refer to the teaching authority the church has as a whole, and then it can refer to individual items of teaching. So you could say, like, the Trinity is authoritative magisterium, meaning it's an authoritative teaching of the church.
And is this related? Because sometimes you'll see people use a phrase "de fide."
Yep, that's
So-
related.
Is that so? What does that mean? De fide? It means of the faith.
Of
but-
the faith, yeah. And typically when it's used, it's shorthand for a kind of longer technical phrase that means it's something as a matter of divine and Catholic faith. And both of those elements are important. If something's a matter of divine faith, it means God has revealed it.
Okay.
If something is a matter of Catholic faith, it means the church has infallibly taught that it is divinely revealed.
Oh. Okay.
So without that, things can be revealed by God that the church hasn't infallibly taught. You know, like, for example, the Gospels record that Andrew is the brother of Peter. And so God has revealed that because the Gospels are divinely inspired. They're authored by God, so God has revealed that Andrew is the brother of Peter. But the magisterium has never come out with a document where they say, we infallibly define that it is a matter of divine revelation that Andrew is the brother of Peter.
Because there's not a big controversy about that, for one thing.
Right. So they've never had occasion to.
Yeah. Right.
But if something meets those criteria, if it is a matter of divine and Catholic faith, then that's what we call a dogma.
Okay. All right,
And if it doesn't meet those criteria, then it's not a dogma. So for something to be a dogma, it has to be both divinely revealed and the church has to infallibly teach that it is divinely revealed.
So if I say I'm reading an article in the New York Times and some archbishop in the Vatican makes a comment, is that the Vatican teaching that? Because often it's presented as the Vatican is saying this or that.
So this is in the context of like a news article, it's
Yeah.
just an interview?
Right.
If they're just quoting an interview, interviews typically are not magisterium at all. They're considered informal communications where it's an expression of the person's opinion. Like when Pope Benedict wrote his Jesus of Nazareth series. He wrote them as a private scholar. He said, this is not an exercise of my magisterium. So people who are members of the magisterium get to determine what level of their authority they're using. And that can go from 0, it's not authoritative at all the way up to this is infallible. If you're the Pope, you get to do that. And so typically, even for interviews with the Pope, it's understood these are not magisterial statements. Typically in an interview, the Pope or whoever is giving an interview, whether it's an archbishop or someone else, is in a situation where they are speaking off the top of their head, kind of like live radio, and they may be asking questions they weren't anticipating, kind of like right now, and they don't have a chance to carefully reflect and formulate their words, and so the remarks they make are considered unofficial. So they're helpful insights onto the thinking of a person, but they're not official. Also, if in the case you mentioned of like an archbishop that works at the Vatican, or it doesn't have to be an archbishop, it could be anybody that works at the Vatican, and they make a remark to the press, it's often portrayed in the press as this is official church teaching. And it's like, no, it's not. It doesn't become church teaching, even if it's from someone in the Vatican, unless the Pope specifically approves it as a teaching.
And then
it becomes part of his personal magisterium.
Fair enough. Again, a special bonus hour of open forum. This hour, calls starting to come in, so we'll get to all of those. The number 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Don't forget that we're continuing with the bulk book specials at shop.catholic.com. Why We're Catholic and Made This Way are running in neck and neck for the most popular bulk titles. Hundreds of books going out every day. It's a great way to teach and share your faith and save a bunch of money, because the single unit price for books can be cut sometimes down to 1/5 if you get them bulk, and then you can share them with friends, neighbors, colleagues, give them away as Christmas gifts, but get them into people's hands. Just go to the bulk book specials category at shop.catholic.com.
bringing you the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
The Trump administration rolls back the Health and Human Services contraceptive mandate.
U.S. bishops calling for the total elimination of nuclear weapons.
Pope Francis offers prayers for the victims of the California wildfires.
The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill banning abortions after 20 weeks.
And Pope Francis says the death penalty is contrary to the gospel.
Your link to news headlines Catholics count on at the top of the hour. Weekdays on EWTN Radio.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to a special Monday open forum here on Catholic Answers Live. I was just saying to Jimmy Akin the other day, I think I would like to do more open forums. I just think that they go over great, especially when you, Tim, the guys here, just answer any question that people have. I really like those hours.
Thank you. I remember when you said that between mouthfuls of sushi.
Yeah. And look at this. Like just a few days later,
But
you
no
made it
sake.
happen, Jimmy Akin. No sake, no. Shall we go to Phyllis in Cincinnati? What if you said no? No, I don't want to go to Phyllis.
I assume that's a rhetorical question.
That would be awful, though, for Phyllis. Phyllis in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on 740 AM. You are up first today with Jimmy Akin. Your question, please, Phyllis.
My question, hi. By the way, I'm glad you took my call.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Yes, thank you. I have heard that Luke was sinless, and I don't understand where that, came from, or is that true?
I'm not familiar with that claim either. It's certainly not a teaching of the church that Luke was sinless. Sometimes you encounter an opinion that John the Baptist was sinless, at least by the time he was born, and that's based on a verse in the Gospel of Luke, because it says that that John the Baptist would be filled with the Holy Spirit from his mother's womb, and therefore it's inferred he had his original sin taken away while he was still in the womb, and thus, I guess, could have lived a sinless life. That's not church teaching either. That's a matter of theological speculation. Personally, I don't tend to support that view because lots of people, just because you receive the Holy Spirit doesn't mean you're not subject to sin. Christians in this life receive the Holy Spirit, and not usually while we're still in our mother's womb, although you could if you were baptized in your mother's womb. There are ways to do that. But even though we've received the Holy Spirit in baptism, and there are other ways of receiving the Holy Spirit too, we're not freed from sin in this life. Similarly, the Old Testament prophets would receive the Holy Spirit, and that didn't make them sinless. So I would say Mary received the Holy Spirit in a special way, and Jesus, of course, was the infinitely good Son of God himself, so he was sinless. But I don't have a basis for saying anybody else was. One thing I would say, though, St. Luke strikes me as a really nice guy. He strikes me based on reading his writings compared to reading some of St. Paul's writings and other New Testament figures. I think St. Luke would have been one of the easiest people to get along with among the authors of the New Testament. He seems to be quite gentle compared to some and not have the sharp elbows that, say, St. Paul does.
So maybe not sinless, but not a bad guy. What do you think, Phyllis?
I think that's great. And actually, you're correct. I was thinking of John the Baptist, and I apologize. But yes, thank you for that comment. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you, Phyllis, for starting us off on this open forum today. Let's go to Jerry, also in Ohio. Big day for Ohio here, listening on 107.4 FM. Jerry, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yeah, thanks for taking the call. My question was, I was brought up a Catholic originally, and not to get a long story in that, but I'm considered a born again believer now. So my question basically would be is, what is the Catholic Church belief on being saved by God's grace?
Well, we believe we're saved entirely by God's grace. It is not possible for a person who's not in a state of justification to merit anything from God. That's actually one of the things that the Council of Trent back in the 1500s emphasized. It stated that nothing which precedes justification, whether faith or works, merits the grace of justification. So justification is something that comes to us purely as a matter of God's grace. Once you're in a state of justification or salvation, God then gives you his grace in a number of ways that allow you to do holy things that please him. Those are the good works that St. Paul says we were created in Christ to do. They only become possible once you have the love of God in your heart. You may do naturally good things before you're justified, but it requires the grace of the virtue of charity or supernatural love of God in order to do something that's genuinely pleasing to God. And when you do things that are genuinely pleasing to God, if you remain one of his friends, then he'll reward you on the last day. But we can't even claim that the things we've done that have pleased God come from us, because it's him who gave us the grace to do them. So it's all a matter of God's grace from beginning to end.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked the question originally is, you know, I'm an older person. I'm like 73 years old, basically, okay?
Cool.
So when I was real young, I was brought up in the Catholic Church and the Catholic school and all that. And, you know, I was taught about receiving the Holy Spirit and all that, and they taught me. And I really felt right when I asked them the question about confirmation when I was a little kid, and I asked them to explain it to me, and they explained to me that the Holy Spirit would come upon you, right? And that you'd receive the Holy Spirit.
Right.
So I really believed that as a kid, and I know when I was a little kid doing that, I felt, I mean, I was like, whatever hit me right then when I went down the altar, I mean, like I was really staggering. I really physically felt the staggering of the, you know, like it's described in the Bible about being drunk almost. And I actually felt that as a little kid.
Sometimes the Holy Spirit gives people that as a grace.
About the grace thing is, as a kid growing up then, I was like, because it wasn't clear, like one day I felt like I was going to heaven, and the next day, because I didn't act, you know, I did certain things or missed church or whatever I did, I felt like I was going to hell, you know? It was like back and forth, back and forth.
So, Jerry, I gotta cut to the chase just a little bit because of the clock. So you left the Catholic faith. Are you considering now returning to the Catholic faith?
No, because the reason being is over this salvation thing. See, I really believe it's God's grace only, and
we would agree with that.
You know what I'm saying? And that means you try as hard as you can to show God's love, and your heart is there. But you do mess up once in a while, but you're not really going to hell, you know what I'm saying?
Well, okay, so we would agree with that. Now, I don't know how you were educated, and people, you know, don't always explain these things, especially to children. They don't always explain them in the clearest way. But there's any given sin you do does not cause you to lose the state of salvation. As you know, the Bible says we all sin in many ways, but that doesn't mean we're not saved at the same time. Some sins are so severe, though, that they will cost you your salvation, and those are called mortal sins. Mortal because they cause spiritual death. An example of that would be brazen, unrepented murder. You say, I know murder is against God's will, but I'm going to kill this person anyway. And then you do it, and knowing that this is a grave sin, and, you know, not being under a psychological compulsion or anything, but just as a fully voluntary act, you say, I know this is gravely contrary to God's will, but I'm going to do it anyway. Well, then you're cutting yourself off from God. You can do that if you murder somebody. You do the same thing if you commit adultery, knowing that this is gravely against God's will. It's right there in the Ten Commandments. and yet you say, I don't care, I'm gonna commit adultery anyway. Not because of any psychological compulsion or anything like that, just knowingly and willfully doing it. Well, that's something where, again, you're defying God knowingly and deliberately in a grave manner of your own free will. Well, that is cutting yourself off from God. And for those kind of sins, the New Testament also teaches that people who do things like that will not inherit the kingdom of God. An example of that is found in 1 Corinthians 6. If you look down around verses 9 to 11, St. Paul is talking to the Corinthians who are Christians and warning them that those who commit adultery, among various other things, won't be saved. He also acknowledges that in beginning of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, that it's possible if they abandon their faith or fall into some of these other practices that they could have believed in Christ in vain, because they can cost themselves salvation. So it's important to recognize that even though salvation is entirely a matter of God's grace, He's also given us the free will to walk away from Him, and He will respect our free will. If we choose to walk away from Him, He's not going to force Himself on us. So, you mentioned your age. I would encourage you to study this, with some additional diligence. And to make that possible, I'd like to, if we can get your address information off the air, I'd like to send you a couple of items, both of which I wrote. One is called 20 Answers Salvation. It's a very short little book that goes into this subject. And then also I have a longer book that goes into more depth called The Drama of Salvation. And if you take a look at those and have further questions, we'd love to be of further service to you.
Thank you very much for the call, Jerry. We appreciate it, and you are always welcome to call back here. Our number, 888-31-TRUTH. We go now to Murray in Arizona, the first non-Ohio call today, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Murray, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Jimmy, thanks for taking my call. Recently I've heard a Protestant objection that the Catholic Church back in its in like the 14, 15, 1600s committed a lot of atrocities through the Inquisition. And really what I'm wanting to know is has the Catholic Church apologized for the actions committed by the Inquisition, and also did the Inquisition have the authority to just throw any non-Catholic in prison and burn them at the stake, for instance?
The Inquisition didn't deal with non-Catholics at all. The whole point of the Inquisition was to uncover people who were within the Catholic community but secretly denying its teachings or promulgating heresies, or who had falsely converted to Christianity. So the Inquisition didn't really engage non-Catholics at all. Also, it didn't typically have the authority to inflict the death penalty on anybody. That was something that the state would typically do. So if in a given territory the Inquisition found somebody who was like secretly spreading heresy, they might turn that person over to the civil authorities, and the civil authorities might apply the death penalty or something, but the Inquisition itself didn't do that. In terms of, has the Catholic Church apologized? Now, this is a somewhat complex question. The answer is yes, but, and I'll get into why real quickly, but it's not like this was unique to Catholics. Your Protestant friend may not be aware of it, but Protestants actually persecuted Catholics for their faith too, and there were Protestant analogs for the Inquisition. And the individual Protestant churches involved may have apologized for them, but if so, I haven't heard about it. But, Protestant groups burned people at the stake too, including Anabaptists, for example. So there's been persecution all around. Having said that, the Catholic Church has done its part to apologize for mistakes that its members have made in the past. In the lead up to the Jubilee year 2000, John Paul II made a special speech and had a special prayer for forgiveness for all of the sins of the past that had been committed by Catholics, including ones like this. And there's a document that a group affiliated with the Holy See came out with called Memory and Reconciliation. So if you look up John Paul II apologizes and Memory and Reconciliation, you should find the right stuff.
Right back with more on Catholic Answers Live.
We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humani Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and, unfortunately, inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Pope Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humani Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humani Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic comes up among friends, family, and coworkers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or by visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Bonus open forum hour this week. Right now, we're in the midst of open forum with Jimmy Akin, our guest. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the author of a whole bunch of stuff, including the book he gave away just a little bit ago, The Drama of Salvation, and then the 20 Answers book, 20 Answers Salvation.
Yeah.
So if you got salvation questions, Jimmy's the man to go to. Actually, with just about any question you got on the Catholic faith, and you're welcome to ask him just by dialing 888-31-TRUTH.
Or secret Soviet doomsday weaponry.
Are you really an authority in secret Soviet doomsday
weaponry? Not an authority, but I know about it enough to answer basic questions. In fact, I was doing that this weekend. We recorded the shows for October for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World podcast, and one of them is about the secret Soviet doomsday weapon that, spoiler warning, is real and still exists.
What?
Yeah.
Did you mention Tsar Bomba?
I didn't mention Tsar Bomba. For people who may not be aware, Tsar Bomba is the largest hydrogen bomb ever detonated. It was built by the Soviet Union. But subsequent to Tsar Bomba, it was concluded that smaller nuclear weapons were actually likely to be of more use in battle. And so the trend went away from making bigger and bigger hydrogen bombs, even though in principle there's no upper limit to how big you can make one.
Oh, that's scary to think about that.
See, I told you I knew about this stuff.
So I got to find out about the doomsday weapon that still exists, though.
Yep, they still got it.
All right. Again, 888-318-7884, the number. Don't call with a question about that. I'm guessing Jimmy's going to save that. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World was where you'll have to find that. Bobby in Rome, Georgia, you are up next. Bobby, your question for Jimmy.
Hey, guys. Hey, Jimmy. I love you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks to you. Thanks to Catholic Answers, I came back to the church several years ago, so I want to thank you guys for that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Bobby.
Oh, you're welcome. My question is about the Kaaba in Mecca.
Okay.
The black building that Muslims, go for their pilgrimage.
Yep.
I've read that Muslims believe it was built by Abraham.
Right, they do.
And several hundred years before Christ was born, obviously.
Yeah,
so does that mean
about 2,000 years before? Uh-huh.
Yeah. So would that mean that Islam is technically older than Christianity, or did Islam sort of steal that place for themselves at some point?
Okay, so I'd have to check to see exactly how old scholars think the Kaaba is. And hypothetically, the building could, be old enough that it was built sometime during the time before Christ, but there were lots of buildings that were built before Christ. We really, from a scholarly point of view, we have zero evidence that it was built by Abraham. This is something that Muhammad claimed, but we don't have any evidence of that historically. I would personally consider that to be Islamic folklore and not something that's actually historically true. Part of the way Islam works as a belief system is it tries to associate as much as possible with Abraham and then claim that the Jewish and Christian scriptures have been corrupted. So they'll say, well, Abraham did have a covenant with God and he did have a child of promise, but guess what? Unlike what the Bible says, that child was not Isaac, it was his brother Ishmael. And we're coincidentally descended, at least the Arabs, are coincidentally descended from Ishmael, and so we're the true children of promise. Well, okay, the problem with that is that just on historiographical grounds, the books of the Old Testament are much older than Muhammad's revelations in the Quran, and they really are the claims in the Quran for remote legendary events like this. They're very self-serving, and they just don't have a lot of credibility from a historical point of view. They're folklore. And so that goes to Islamic claims about the origin of the Kaaba as well. Even if it were built at a remote period of time, well, the pyramids were built by at a remote period of time. They were built, like 2500 BC. And yet that doesn't prove the Egyptian religion is true. Even if the Kaaba was built by Abraham, that still wouldn't prove that Islam is true. It might prove Judaism is true, or Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism is true. It only would go to validate their claims if, as they claim, Abraham was a Muslim. And if you can't establish that point, then it really doesn't get you any traction for showing the antiquity of Islam, because a building doesn't prove anything about a faith. In fact, we know that the building was a pagan shrine prior to its adoption by Muslims. We know that there were various gods that were worshipped at the Kaaba. I mean, this is something that's not disputed. Muslim sources talk about this. There were various gods that were worshipped there, including some female ones, and they had idols, and then at a certain point, Muhammad took control of the site and cleared it of the idols. There's also a stone there that is often thought to be of meteoric origin, because sometimes when a stone falls from the sky, ancient peoples would worship it, and that also seems to be potentially part of what's happening there. And even today, even though they're not worshiping it as a god, Muslims will venerate that stone, but that seems to be a relic of the fact that, or a remnant of the fact that it was worshipped, likely as a stone that fell from the sky, when this was still a pagan shrine. So in terms of the most likely historical scenario, this was just a pagan shrine. It was built by pagans, not by Abraham, and it was eventually co-opted as a site for worship by Muhammad.
Well, you are a gentleman and scholar. Thank you.
Thank you.
All true, Bobby. You got it all correct there. Thank you very much for that call. Let's go to John in Dallas, listening on the EWTN app. John, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Jimmy, I'm sure you've answered this question before, and I think I've heard you answer it, but when my wife asked it the other day, I couldn't remember what you'd said. But who are the Nephilim in chapter 4 of Genesis? I think it's chapter 4.
The Nephilim in Genesis are a group of beings that are understood in different ways in the Jewish Christian community. Sometimes they are understood, and this is particularly the case in some of the church fathers, sometimes they are understood as beings who represent a kind of interbreeding between the upper classes and the lower classes. So you have in Genesis the sons of God come down and take for wives the daughters of men, and then they give birth to these giants. And according to one view, this is the most naturalistic view, and you do find this in the church fathers, the sons of God represent some elite class of ordinary human beings, like priests, who could be considered the sons of God because they work for God, they're priests. Also, the rulers in the ancient world could sometimes be considered divine, like Pharaoh in Egypt was considered to be a god on earth. So it also could be rulers. So it could be priests, it could be rulers, it could be priest rulers, because sometimes priests would rule, like Pharaoh. He was not only the political ruler, he was also the chief priest of Egypt. And then when they would take daughters from commoners, from common stock as wives, their offspring would be very favored, and they would have high position that would let them get a reputation as mighty men because they'd have high positions in the army, for example. And they might even have better diets that could even make them physically bigger. And whether they were metaphorically giants or physically larger than ordinary people, you could see how the idea would get started that these favored offspring would be regarded as kind of giants among men in society. So that's the naturalistic theory. Beyond that, there are supernaturalistic theories that are seriously entertained by scholars. According to this view, the sons of God are supernatural beings, what we would today call angels. But they then, according to this theory, interbred with human women and had hybrid children that displayed unusual characteristics, including potentially being larger than normal. The big question from a modern perspective on this is, well, how would that work? How would an angel, which is a created intellect that doesn't natively have a physical body, how would such a being be capable of interbreeding with a human? That sounds like, something that wouldn't be possible. And so some people have said, well, that can't be what it means. It can't be about interbreeding. Except that's thinking with a modern perspective. In the ancient world, the nature of angels wasn't as clearly understood as it is today. But what Scripture does reveal is that angels are capable of taking human form. And we don't know the limit of the anatomical correctness of their ability to take on human form. They might be able to take on human form down to the DNA level. And if they're able to do that, then they could take on a human form capable of reproduction. Also, they might, pinch some of the germ cells needed from somewhere else and just use them. We know they can interact with physical objects, so they could certainly get some germ cells from elsewhere and then use them if they wanted. They could even modify the germ cells first so that the offspring would have the characteristics they were going for. So it's not clear which of those two options, the basic naturalistic option or the supernaturalistic option, that's something the church doesn't have a teaching on, but you find both views expressed among Jewish and Christian scholars.
And we'll leave it there. John, thank you very, very much for that question. Open forum this hour with Jimmy Akin. Next hour, Dr. Ray Guarendi will be here to talk about his brand new book, Thinking Like Jesus, so please join us for that. Right now, I also want to let you know that gift subscriptions to Catholic Answers Magazine are a great gift for friends, family, seminarians, students, your priests. Sign up now for the gift subscription, and they'll get our first, the special Christmas Advent issue in time. So you also get a free digital subscription when you sign up. Go to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com and subscribe before the end of September to get those gift subscriptions to Catholic Answers Magazine. CatholicAnswersMagazine.com.
This is Bishop James Conley of the Diocese of Lincoln. Keep it right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
EWTN, teaching the truth.
Well, I don't think we're like the typical college students because we really hang out at our campus ministry and everything. It's amazing about how much more connected you feel. We share really cool articles from actually you guys, EWTN, and like what you were saying about evangelization. So that's really nice.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Open forum this hour with Jimmy Akin. We go now to Connor in Kalamazoo, Michigan, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Connor, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, hi guys.
Hi.
So, my question is, are demonic possessions in the New Testament just misdiagnosed mental illnesses? The church today even admits that most cases aren't legitimate possessions.
Well, it is a common opinion among many today that that many times when a person thinks they're being oppressed by the devil, it's just mental illness. But today, the church does acknowledge that demonic possession is a real phenomenon. Now, there's a question of how it manifests and how common it is, and that can vary from one area in the world to another. But the church does acknowledge today that demons are real and they can possess people under at least some circumstances, and that the church correspondingly understands the same to be the case for the demonic possessions in the New Testament and elsewhere in the ancient world. Were some things that people were going through back then, mental illness, that some people misidentified as demonic possession? Yeah, sure. Just like today, people who self-diagnose demonic possession are frequently, it's their imagination or it's a mental illness they're dealing with, but that doesn't mean they all fall into that category. And in particular, the ones that Jesus interacted with and that St. Paul interacted with, where at times the demons would have preternatural knowledge that the person had no way of knowing otherwise, that were capable of doing things like with the Gadarene demoniac, when Jesus gets the demons out of the demoniac but allows them permission to go into the pigs, and then all the pigs rush down the hill and kill themselves. Well, that wouldn't happen if you just talked to a mentally ill guy and made him feel better. Right, so we have signs that are recorded alongside these things that indicates they're not simply, at least the ones that Jesus and Paul were dealing with, are not simply mental illness. There's something more going on here that's of a genuinely spiritual nature.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good.
Yeah, it's basically the same as it is today. In the ancient world, it would have been a mix. Some things would have been people's imaginations, some things would have been mental illness, and some things would have been real demons. And those are the ones we read about in the New Testament.
All right, well, thanks, guys.
Sure thing.
Thank you very, very much. 888-318-7884, the number here. Open forum with Jimmy Akin right now. Let's go to Mary in Superior, Wisconsin, listening on Real Presence Radio. Mary, you are up with Jimmy Akin. Your question, please.
Hi. I've got a question that's totally different than what you've been going through today.
What's your question?
I attend a small church here, and the choir isn't, there's no real choir, just some song leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen around town some flyers for one of the larger Lutheran churches inviting people to come and join their choir.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, on the Catholic side, I mean, is there a problem with joining a Lutheran choir?
There's not a document anywhere that's going to say thou may not join a Lutheran choir. There is a provision in the Code of Canon Law that says the Catholic faithful should, even in their patterns of daily activity, always maintain communion with the Catholic Church. And what that means is open to some interpretation, but if you're getting too far away from Catholic faith and practice at some point, you're violating that canon. In the case of joining a Lutheran choir, now at one point in history when the churches were in open antagonism to each other, this would not have been possible at all. But these days, we're in a situation where there's been a significant degree of reconciliation between the two churches, such that it's possible for on an ecumenical basis for Catholics and non-Catholics to pray together. Well, singing is in a choir is just praying with music. And so if you can pray together, then in principle, you could sing hymns together. And certainly, if you're a Catholic and you're visiting a Protestant church, or if a Protestant's visiting a Catholic church, and it's time to sing a hymn, you can sing the hymn in principle. But there are some limitations that need to be taken into account here, both as matters of moral principle and as principles involving prudence. In terms of moral principles, if a given hymn that the Lutheran choir would want to sing contains material that's contrary to the Catholic faith, then you couldn't sing that hymn. You'd have to recuse yourself from that hymn. If you are being exposed to material that's tempting you to drift away from your Catholic faith, like, oh, I'm going to church twice now. I've got to go to Mass on Sunday, and then I got to go to this choir thing on Sunday at the Lutheran church, and I don't want to do both. Well, okay, if you're getting led away from your faith as a Catholic, from the practice of your faith, either practically or on the level of doctrine, then you would need to not be part of this choir as well. Your first duty is to protect your Catholic faith and practice. Then there's the question of scandal. If people know that you're in this Lutheran choir, it could raise questions in their minds about whether or not you think that it's important to maintain a Catholic identity, and whether you think that it's just a matter of indifference to God, whether you're Catholic or Lutheran, when in fact it does matter to God what faith you belong to. And if you undermine that by your patterns of activity so that people around you start to think, oh, it's not so important whether you're Catholic or not, well, then that's leading them into scandal. And whether that would happen, given the people in your situation, that's something that's a matter of prudence that you'd have to evaluate, but there's an underlying moral principle there. So I would say it's not impossible in principle to sing with Lutherans any more than it's impossible to pray with Lutherans, but there are some significant cautions that have to be borne in mind. And you might want to also look at other options like, hey, maybe we can start a choir at my church. You don't have to be a big church to have a choir. Even a small church can have one. Maybe you could lead the choir yourself.
Yeah, you gave me, sort of answered my question, because I certainly don't want anybody to lead me away from my Catholic faith. And as you sit there, I can see where things could make you start to think about, like you said, why go to church twice on the weekend?
Right. Yeah.
So I think I'll probably just stay away from the Lutheran choir.
Okay.
Well, Mary, we're grateful for the call. Call anytime. We do appreciate it. Let's try to see if we can get some more in here before the end of the hour. However, let's try Rory in Toronto. Rory, you are up with Jimmy Akin. Your question, please.
Yes, hello there.
Hi, Rory. We're limited for time, so you're going to have to get right to your question.
Yes. My question is regarding Hebrews chapter 10. I'll start with verse 14. James R. White, who I believe James has had a debate with on a couple of occasions, uses this verse as a proof text against the Catholic position and uses it also to support eternal security. I'm just wondering if you can comment on this particular verse. That's Hebrews chapter 10, verse 14. For by one offering he has perfected for all time those who are made holy.
Okay, so there are a number of things here. I'll deal with them briefly. I could go on at greater length, but the first thing is this verse is occurring in context of a contrast with the way the Jewish high priesthood works, where every year on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the high priest would have to perform a special ceremony of atonement. Also, there were bulls and goats being offered continually at the temple. And the point that the author of Hebrews is making is none of these really provided the ultimate kind of atonement you needed for salvation. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a point. Otherwise, they would have stopped being offered. And so he's making the point then that Jesus' one sacrifice on the cross does all of that. So that's why we don't have to keep re-sacrificing Jesus. His one sacrifice on the cross provided everything we need for eternal salvation. It completely provided for that need. Well, complete is just another translation of perfect. And so when the author says that he's made perfect those who are being made holy, it is, if memory serves here, it's present tense in Greek, which can indicate a progressive action. He's made us perfect in the sense of he's completely provided for us everything we need for our eternal salvation. However, that doesn't mean it all gets applied to us all at once, or that we can't lose it. It just means he's made it available. We've been completely provisioned in that sense. Whether we make use of the provisions he's given us is a different question. And even this verse acknowledges a progressive aspect to this in terms of people being made holy. We're not completely sanctified the moment we first turn to Jesus. Sanctification is something that happens over the course of the Christian life. There are also other verses in Hebrews that indicate it is quite possible to lose one's salvation. And so this verse has to be understood in light of those.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it, Rory. Appreciate that call. As again, I will say once again, Dr. Ray Guarendi will be here next hour. We're going to discuss his brand new book, Thinking Like Jesus, The Psychology of a Faithful Disciple. So please hang out for that. Jimmy, your new book coming out in a few weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I've wanted to write it for years because there's not another book like this.
Isn't it? Now, I wonder, have you ever thought, how many books do you have in your mind that you're like, oh, I've been wanting to do that one for a long time, and you just wait? A few dozen?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
A few dozen?
Just a question of finding time and publishers.
All nonfiction or any fiction ones in there?
Oh, no, I have fiction too, but that's a whole other category than what I was referring to at the moment.
So you have a few dozen nonfiction plus some fiction ones you want to do. We got to think of a nom de plume for you to write fiction.
How do you know I don't have one?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Are you... I know I can't think of the name of an author.
I am not Stephen King.
There you go. Okay, I couldn't think of a single author. I just went completely blank on it. All right, Jimmy, get to work and finish that big giant talk you're giving with slides at the conference coming up.
Thank you.
And I've got my blue and white check shirt I'm going to wear for square dancing.
Oh, okay. If you want.
Isn't that the color you're supposed to wear? Blue and white checks?
No, you can wear...
you could just wear anything?
Wear something, I'll put it that way.
Well, I will be wearing something. So I didn't have to send my wife out to buy a gingham dress for this?
No, I don't even know what a gingham dress is.
No. I guess she doesn't need it. We'll see you in a few minutes. We'll be back with Dr. Ray Guarendi. We're going to talk about his brand new book, Thinking Like Jesus, right after this. And Catholic Answers Live. Thanks.
everybody. This is Dion, the Wanderer. Hey, you want to know when I keep it on Catholic Answers Live? I feel at home. God bless. Stay well.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture's moral center continues to fly apart, and with every form of deviance publicly aired and celebrated, we have no choice but to equip our kids to understand about such issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level, to meet the world's challenges. Silence can no longer be an option. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging on to the shop at Catholic.com.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humanae Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and, unfortunately, inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humanae Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humanae Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic of contraception comes up among friends, family, and co-workers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
So, you're listening to Catholic Radio. I think it's safe to say that you probably want to become like Jesus. Theosis is a fancy word used to explain the process of becoming like Christ. It's how God takes sinners like you and me and transforms us into who we were created to be. Basically, rockin' saints. Clumsy Theosis is a podcast where I take 2,000 years of Catholic goodness, draw from the great minds and spiritual masters of the Church, boil it down, distill it, and give practical advice to 21st century Christians. Basically, we'll learn how to do this Catholic thing like a boss. Subscribe to Clumsy Theosis wherever good podcasts are found.
Hey everyone, Carlo Broussard here. Did you know that you can arrange for me and a host of other on-fire Catholic Answers speakers to speak at your conference or parish event? Here's how you do it. Go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com and you'll find all the information that you need to book me or our other great speakers. That's CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com. We look forward to seeing you. Sharing the gospel with family and friends can be challenging. It's especially hard when they won't even hear you out because of all the mental roadblocks they've built up. This is Carlo Broussard, and in my new book, Prepare the Way, my aim is to help you tackle that essential first step to apologetics and evangelization, getting people to listen with an open mind. Even our best witness can bounce right off folks like these if we don't prepare the way first, breaking down barriers and leaving minds and souls free to encounter the truth. I'll give you evidence and arguments and step-by-step strategies based on asking the right questions to help them overcome their obstacles and make a straight path for the Lord. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to our Super Big Monday show here on Catholic Answers Live. I am your host, Cy Kellett. In this hour, we discuss thinking like Jesus. Can we learn to think like the Master? Can we really learn to put on the mind of Christ? 888-318-7884 is our number. 888-318-7884. Our guest this hour just happens to have a brand new book called Thinking Like Jesus, The Psychology of a Faithful Disciple. Dr. Ray Guarendi is also well known to most of you for his show, The Doctor Is In, which can be heard weekdays on all the EWTN stations, plus more probably. His other books, in addition to Thinking Like Jesus, include You're a Better Parent Than You Think and Discipline That Lasts a Lifetime. Dr. Ray, thanks so much for being with us for this Monday.
Cy, how are you?
I'm very well. Are you feeling up to doing a full hour with us? You feel like your authentic self?
Well, I got a call from Nick about a minute ago, and he said, we're ready to go. And I said, Nick, I'm sorry here. My biorhythms are out of sync, and I'm not feeling committed to this particular venture at this time. I was committed about 10 minutes ago, but in the overall emotional ups and downs, my authentic and genuine self, I don't think I'm being honest to you or anyone else to do the show right now. And the poor guy, instead of laughing, he said, "Well, okay, we'll have Jimmy do it." That's when I yelled at him. I said, "There's no way I'm giving up my hour to Jimmy. He's got his own hours."
I think that is just great. Nick is such a good man, and he, as I have said many times on here, he's the hardest working person at Catholic Answers, and I just love the fact that he would have run down the hall and gotten Jimmy because Dr. Ray was not feeling authentic today. He would have done it. I'm not feeling it.
Good to be with you guys. I always like being with you guys.
Oh, it's so great to have you here. And we're very, very grateful when you do, because you're a very big media personality. You're a superstar. And to have you on is, I don't know. I don't know how to finish that.
I can't acknowledge that status. I cannot acknowledge that superstar status because whether you know this or not,
okay.
I'm making my George Foreman comeback for the Humility Award.
All right, good for you.
I had dominated it for 8 years. I went into retirement. Al Cresta took the Humility Award from me. We found out recently it was a participation trophy that he won.
Oh.
And so I'm back in training, so I can't acknowledge superstar.
All right.
But I appreciate it, though.
So we'll just say he's a regular star. It's like what's the difference between a model and a supermodel? I don't know the difference between a star and a superstar, but if
I can be an asteroid.
Okay.
I can be an asteroid.
Fair enough. Well, we're glad to have you. Thinking like Jesus. Actually, we're instructed to put on the mind of Christ. So how do we go about thinking like Jesus?
There are a bazillion books out there, Cy, that talk about putting on the mind of Christ. And they tend to be books that are inspirational, a lot of scripture quotes, extrapolating from our Lord's teaching and how it can fit everyday life. Well, what would happen if you took a shrink like me, and I took a lot of psychological principles that are now standard. This is the mindset out there now in the secular world. And I said, where does psychology clash with Christianity?
Oh.
And where do they cooperate?
Yes.
So if I take, and when you and I talk a little bit more here, you're going to see there's a number of parallels between some psychological principles I'll bring up and thinking a little better in terms of getting along with people, in terms of this crazy thing called self-image. When do you need to forgive and not forgive? Are you holy or are you a jerk? So it's got about 35 chapters in it. They're all kind of small, bite-sized. Let's take a look at this particular aspect of a mindset that now dominates our culture. I'll give you an example of one. How many times did our Lord say you're supposed to forgive?
7 times 70.
Right, and he didn't mean literally 490, right? What did he mean?
You just keep going, just keep forgiving, don't stop.
All right. I don't agree with that.
What? Wait, what?
I do not agree with that. As a matter of fact, I've spoken in the book that I believe that probably at most I would have to forgive about 50% of the time. Maybe 50% of the time. The reason for this is much of the time that I take offense or I feel hurt or someone has done me wrong, and I feel magnanimous, Si, in forgiving them. Look at what a good Christian I am. I'm so magnanimous. I forgive my mother-in-law. She's so obnoxious. She makes so many critical remarks about me. More than half the time, Si, the offense doesn't exist.
Oh.
It's in my head. And so therefore I'm forgiving thin air. And do you see what that does to your soul?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, first of all, it makes you more prideful.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a forgiving guy. Gosh, you know what she said the other day? I couldn't believe it. And in fact, she meant nothing by it. Okay? But I impugned her motive, and then I took offense, and then I said, "Oh Lord, help me to forgive her." Instead of saying, "Dear Lord, show me if there's anything to forgive here. If this just isn't my prickliness." See what I mean?
Yes. I was struck by that in several chapters of this book, I have to say. There was one chapter where you talked about something that I immediately knew you were wrong because it applied to me. So I thought, nope, he's wrong. And then
I had you in mind.
Yeah, and then I kept
picture in that chapter.
Yeah, but then I kept reading. I realized, oh, he's right. Okay, so there's this thing that you can do when when the moment gets heated, when somebody has pushed my button, as they say, or whatever, and now I'm all fired up, and if you will just not speak for a minute or two. Like you,
not even
right?
10 seconds.
Is it 10 seconds? Right. So I think the name of the chapter is "It Will Pass Quickly" or something like that. And that is such wisdom. And I think we are taught in a way, because we're a society that's taught, if you're offended, then share that offense, to make a big noise. And we're taught, speak out. And if you'll just stop so 10 seconds. There's a chance for you to breathe and realize that thing that I'm going to say is not what I should be saying. It's going to hurt this person.
Si, you are a young pup.
Yeah.
So would you remember something called assertiveness training?
Oh, I think I vaguely remember that. Yeah, from about the same time as transcendental meditation, I think. Assertiveness.
Assertiveness training basically said, to keep from getting ulcers, if you want to view it that way.
Yeah.
To keep yourself from getting stressed and upset at people, you need to assert your rights. You need to let them know where they've stepped on you.
Right. Yeah.
Where they've inappropriately
I remember this.
Invaded your emotional space, so to speak. Okay?
Yep.
Now, assertiveness training, basically, if you follow it, can make you pretty obnoxious. Because you feel like, I got to tell everybody when and how they offended me. I'm going to tell my mother-in-law. Instead of ignoring what she said about my children, I'm going to, Emily, I don't appreciate you making that comment about my son. And, of course, Emily will go, "Oh, Ray, I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry. Of course. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. I feel so much better now that you've cleared the air with your assertiveness training."
I don't think that's going to happen.
90% of the times that I have to confess stuff in confession, word-wise, is when I spoke within the first 15 seconds of my emotional surge. When I most felt like saying it, because physiologically speaking, my body was screaming,
"Yeah,
let him have it! Let him have it!"
Right.
If I just use the intellectual part of me and tell myself over and over, "You say it, Ray, you're going to regret it. You say it, Ray, you're going to regret it. You say it, you're going to cause more problems. You say it, it's not going to be understood anyway. If you say it, it's not going to create peace. It's just going to create more of an argument. Shut up, Ray. You never have to apologize for what you didn't say.
And it struck me reading that chapter, and I want to get to a couple others that I was struck by. But this
the whole book was about you, Si.
Yeah.
You're going to get down to it.
Well, it was really. I mean, in the sense that we all, nobody's that unique. We all have basically the same structure. So, but what struck me about that is that the mind of Christ's way of thinking is one that values other people's peace, that values the comedy of the home, a basic kind of I don't know another word for it, but peace, and that the mind of the world says, say your bit, get you. And so even in that little chapter there is something so Christian about being reminded. No, you actually can go a whole day without having to speak your mind in the heat of a moment, and you're going to be better off, and the world's going to be better off if you don't. So just follow Jesus in that.
Let's play Jeopardy.
All right.
You're going to have signature songs for $100, Alex, okay?
Okay.
What was Nat King Cole's signature song?
Okay. What is Unforgettable?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
$100. Christians should have a similar song. Unoffendable.
Yes.
What is at the basis of being offended? Most of the time, we get offended with words. Very few people have punched me in the face. Okay, very few people have taken a ball bat to the fender of my car. Well,
you must live in a better neighborhood than I do.
Yeah,
but okay.
I was going to say, you get gunshots fired at you. But all the offense that I take comes from words. Now, as a Christian, they never should have said that to me.
Yes.
Don't they realize I didn't mean that? Don't they realize that I'm a good person? Don't they realize that I'm trying very hard? How could they say that about me? At the root of this kind of hypervigilant offense is pride. In the chapter, I say, if we were in fact Christians like our Lord,
yeah,
we would never get offended, because we wouldn't expect to be understood all the time. We wouldn't expect to be complimented. We wouldn't expect that people are going to show us respect. Why? Because, I'm a good person. Why don't they recognize that? Unoffendable. I'll tell you, you want a measuring stick of how you're doing in terms of your own day-to-day pride with everybody? How easily you get offended.
I just need to calm down for a minute before I say anything.
I know it, and I didn't want to say anything to you, buddy, but you said about 4 things in the previous 10 minutes that upset me, but I let them go.
Okay. Well, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to ask you, because I noticed, I hadn't thought about the structure of it until you mentioned it, that there are points in which the teaching of Christ is actually greatly at odds. And it's not all a book about how Christ's teaching is better than what a modern psychologist will teach you, but there are moments that are at odds. There was one that struck me. I want to come back to that when we come back. But I got to let people know about this. Trent Horn, our apologist here, is debating an atheist gentleman, Dan Barker, tonight on the topic, does the Christian God exist? And it's not just does God exist. Note, it's does the Christian God exist? So this is something you don't want to miss. The debate will be streamed live at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern, right on our Facebook page. So you just go to Facebook, type in Catholic Answers, and you can watch that debate. Trent Horn with atheist Dan Barker. Does the Christian God exist? I'm going to give you a little spoiler. He does.
Have a question? We've got answers. Catholic Answers Live.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
I've got a few things here and there that I've learned along the way, and I like to do it. Plus, I'm always studying history, so I try to bring in some of the historical perspective, especially at a time in our history when people don't know much history anymore.
Open Line with Father Mitch Pacwa, Wednesday afternoon, 3 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teens spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Ray Guarendi, our guest this hour, and we are delighted to have him. He's got a brand new book out called Thinking Like Jesus, The Psychology of a Faithful Disciple. And I'm about to hold up my copy of the book to the camera for those who are watching on Facebook and YouTube and all that, because part of it I highlighted in yellow, chapter 14, Value-Laden Words Are Bad, which is a funny, if you think about it, that's a funny title for a chapter. But this sentence I highlighted: in graduate school, I was taught a second language. Call it the language of non-judgmentalism. And you go on to give some examples of it. A lot of use of the word unacceptable, words like unacceptable, unfortunate, inappropriate, never words like good or bad, evil or heroic or anything like that. Words that have they feel like they've been sapped almost of any kind of impact. That's inappropriate. We don't do that. That's inappropriate. Is this a point, this kind of use of language that doesn't judge it at all, is this a point at which therapeutic psychology departs from Christianity?
Interesting paradox. When I was in grad school, we were told, as therapists, relentlessly told, you don't judge. You make no judgments about what the client tells you. You do not enter into any kind of worldview, any kind of perspective. You simply accept everything the client tells you. Well, even as a young shrink, I realized that this doesn't work. This doesn't work. Everybody carries some system into therapy. Whether they deny it or not, it's going to be there. And part of that non-judgmentalism was the extrapolating from non-judgmental theory to language. And you say things like, excuse me, butt kiss, ice pick in your sister's head, inappropriate choices, inappropriate choices. Take 2 stickers off your system, we'll give them back when the bleeding stops at the hospital. Can you imagine going to the priest? Bless me, Father, mistakes were made. and I would like to apologize if God took something I did out of context,
right?
Became offended by it. Well, I'm sorry for his oversensitivity. I mean, this is what's happening. We're not allowed to say that leaving your wife and 5 kids is bad. Yeah. You know, it was his life choice.
Yeah.
When my kids were before we started homeschooling, they were in Catholic school, a couple of them, and the kids were being instructed for confession, and they were told to say what they had to say to the priest as mistakes. As mistakes. 2 plus 2 is 5 is a mistake.
Right.
Moral misconduct is more than a mistake. But that language, you see it pervades parenting, Si. It's all through parenting. It's all through enlightened parenting. You go to any child development run daycare and listen to the teachers. Rocky, punching your classmate in the face, inappropriate action. Inappropriate action. What might be another option? Yeah, we've morally antisepticized the language, and Christians of all people know that you have to put moral language on conduct. You have to, or else it's stripped of any kind of meaning.
So Jesus does not. I suppose that this is where thinking like Jesus it makes a pretty stark departure from this therapeutic way of talking. So I guess my question is, like, how does Jesus address these things? And if I'm going to think like Jesus about these value things, about doing good and bad, or evil and that kind of thing, how do I think like Jesus and not like the modern therapeutic culture?
Let me tie this into another chapter in the book. When I was in the evangelical world, I was there for 8 years. I left the Catholic Church kind of indifferently. Figured I was going to find Jesus where I would be most comfortable and somewhat entertained. We had Bible studies, and one of the questions that often came up in Bible study is, why do people have such a problem with us? What is it about our moral stances that bother people? And the common answer, which is really a self-defensive answer, was they're convicted. They realize somewhere down deep that we're right, and this bothers them. So therefore, they react negatively to us. I remember thinking, Cy, that may be part of it, but I have to wonder if sometimes people react negative to me as a Christian because I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
You know, the chapter is titled, Am I Holy or Am I a Jerk? Because I can come across as superior. I can come across holier than you. I can come across with an attitude that clearly shows that I am above you. And that can come across in my language. You know, let's say that my son is living with his girlfriend. And let's say that, of course, he wasn't raised that way. Now, what do I do with that girlfriend? What do I do when he wants to bring her to my house on Christmas Eve? Do I carry this sour puss face just to reinforce to them I don't approve of this? Or do I welcome her and I love her, and my son clearly knows I don't approve of the arrangement? Obviously, I raised him for 20 years. But I got to love her, and I can't come across as a jerk, and I can't come across with judgmental language about what they're doing, because I'm going to lose my son. And furthermore, the girl he's with, if she ever becomes his wife, she's going to have a very sour taste in her mouth about this guy who proclaimed himself some kind of elite Christian, but at the same time was the person in her life who showed her the least love. I can't do that.
Yeah, this is another thing that strikes me about this book, Thinking Like Jesus, is how often you're reminding us. I'd have to say, I sometimes think taking a little delight in reminding us that most of these situations, these difficult situations we get in, we're implicated in them. It's not just somebody imposing something on us like we're a victim. Like that chapter on toxic people, where you talk about like the idea that, yeah, maybe that person is toxic for you, but maybe you just don't want to be around them and behave yourself as well. You know, that so you kind of, well, you're not letting us off the hook. I'll say that.
Psychology has certain catchphrases, Cy, that it uses. And these catchphrases drift into the popular mindset. Toxic people is one of them. Not unusually, someone will go to a therapist and talk about some person in their life. Usually it's a family member, by the way. And they will say how this person disturbs their peace. When they are around this person, they're on edge. They feel so much better if they wouldn't have to deal with this person. It just happens to be their mother, okay? This is not the mailman that comes by for 2 seconds and drops your mail off that you can avoid. This is your mother. And so the psychologist may say, well, you know, that's a toxic individual. And for our own peace, for our own emotional stability, you need to rid yourself of toxic people in your life. And my point is this: very few people in our lives are toxic. Yes, there are those who are dangerous or abusive, and you have to protect yourself or your children from them. But most people that we label toxic, the better word is difficult. They're not easy to be around. They're unpleasant. Yeah, they make snarky remarks. But it happens to be your sister, okay?
Yeah.
This is not the lady that teaches swimming lessons at the local Y that you're just not going to take her class. This is your sister. So Christians especially should recognize two things. One, most people are not toxic. They may be difficult or unpleasant. And two, here's the key question, Si, and I think it's what you were alluding to. Always got to ask yourself, in my perception of this toxic person, how much of it is my dynamic? How much of it is, do I take offense? How much of it is it that I, in fact, don't relate well?
Yeah, you keep implicating me. Be right back with more Dr. Ray.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humani Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and unfortunately inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Pope Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humani Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humani Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic comes up among friends, family, and coworkers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or by visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest this hour, Dr. Ray Guarendi, has a brand new book, Thinking Like Jesus, The Psychology of a Faithful Disciple. And Dr. Ray, throughout the book, I was kind of teasing that you feel implicated, but that is one of the things about the Christian faith, maybe as opposed to the therapeutic faith of the what some people call the Church of Nice or something. I can never quite remember all of the catchphrases, but this modern idea. It strikes me when I'm teasing you about you keep implicating me when I'm reading it, but there is something about the Christian faith that it however gently or severely, it seems to be constantly the message is you are not the center of the world. You have things to do. You have a mission from God. Get on with it. Stop being the center of the world. Whereas the message of the world seems to be if you're not the center, something's wrong.
How many options, Si, would you think you'd come across if you typed in child, self-esteem, search? You want to guess?
A million.
Last I looked, it was over 90 million.
Yeah.
Do you think that you would have the same amount of options if you typed in child, humility, search?
No. But okay, so say something about that now. Like, you do address humility in this book, True Humility and False Humility. So I don't know what a psychologist is taught about humility. You know that, but so what is the proper role of humility, and how do we be humble and think like Jesus?
Humility is not a word that you're going to hear in much pop psychology lexicon. It is a word that's smack in the middle of Christian virtue. In psychology, what is paramount is self-image. Ray Guarendi has to think that Ray Guarendi is a wonderful human being, and Lord forbid that anybody would imply that Ray Guarendi is not just a special human being. One of the great quotes in the movie The Incredibles, I don't know if you remember this, the kid was saying he's special because he can run really, really fast. His mother says, I think the kid's name is Dash. Dash, everybody is special. And he says, if everybody is special, nobody is special, which is a great line.
Right.
Now, in psychology, the push in the 70s, and since then, by the way, the man who really pushed hard on this was a guy named Carl Rogers, okay? Yeah. Unconditional positive regard was Rogers' big thing. He since said, I think I created a monster. He said, because if you seek self-image just for the sake of self-image, you get self-centeredness. Mm. From a research perspective, self-image isn't related to much of anything. Oh, yeah, the theories say it's related to better grades, and it's related to not using drugs, and it's related to not getting in trouble with the law. Not at all, okay? So that's the first thing. But Christians, and here's where we diverge from the self-image movement. Who says Christians should have infinite value? Who says this? God. God says it.
Yeah.
The creator of the universe says that Cy Kellett is of infinite worth. Not Cy Kellett. You don't need Cy Kellett to say it. You've got the creator of the universe who established your self-image. And I think that's part of where people, I know an awful lot of folks come in my office, and they're messed up. And they're Christians. And they're messed up because they say, I lack confidence. I don't know, I just don't feel I'm very good. I say, are you a Christian? Well, yes. The Lord is the center of my life. Well, doesn't he say that you're infinitely valuable? And they look at me with this deer look, as if, well, I guess, but aren't I supposed to think I'm wonderful? You don't have to. Our Lord said things like, when you do something good, just say we're worthless servants. What? Didn't he not have Psych 101 in synagogue? What's with him? Where is he saying stuff like this? Esteem others more highly than yourself, St. Paul says. Oh, now wait a minute, Paul. Hold on here, buddy. Didn't you see my flower on the bulletin board where it says there's nobody like me? I'm wonderful.
Mm.
Yes, of course we value our children, we value ourselves, but because of God's perspective, not because of some artificially constructed Ray Guarendi says Ray Guarendi's wonderful. What if Ray Guarendi's a jerk making that judgment?
That's right. You have to have a standard outside of yourself in order for yourself to, right.
I like saying I'm wonderful. Shoot, I don't argue with me.
No, I hardly ever argue with myself about that either, except when I'm reading one of your books that's telling me I need to develop healthy humility. But it strikes me that maybe for a child, that our children today in this world who are told that you're special, everybody's special, that one of two bad outcomes could come from that. One, they're not going to believe you, in which case they just see the world as a lie, or they are going to believe you and they're going to be little monsters.
They can be entitled. Don't forget, if I have a wonderful self-image, it all ties into my entitlement that you better not offend me. You better recognize how wonderful I am too. And therefore, if you would even bring up anything that I might have to work on, if you're my brother-in-law and you say to me, Ray, sometimes you say things you shouldn't say. I do. What? What do you? Yeah, well, give me an example. Rather than saying, how do I do that? Tell me, please. I want to know. I want to hear what you have to say.
Right.
That's the only way you're going to self-improve. There's a chapter in the book that really speaks to me, Cy. I call it Close the Book, not alluding to close that book.
Yeah.
When you have folks in your life that you have a hard time relating to, is there 20 or 30 of them, or maybe 1, 2, or 3?
1, 2, or 3.
Right, exactly. A very small handful of people in our lives give us the most frustration, give us the most disappointment, give us the most irritation. And here's the second question. Of those folks, have they only been like that for a week or a month or years?
Yeah, years, right.
Right. So, Cy, here's a question for you. When are you going to get to the point where you recognize that's just the way they are? When are you going to close the book and say, hey, why do I keep frustrating myself when she behaves the same way she's always behaved for 19 years?
Yeah.
When am I going to get to the point where she loses the power to ruin my day with a remark because I kind of know what she is, and I'm not saying I hate her for it, and I'm not saying she should roast in hell. I'm just coming to a logical, realistic conclusion. How much evidence do I need to go, well, this isn't surprising anymore. This has been happening for 2 decades.
Yeah, it's surprising how little evidence actually figures into our learning process, though. But
I asked somebody, I say, well, how long has she made snarky remarks about that? Oh my, I've probably since I married her son. Well, how long have you been married? 14 years. You haven't come to the conclusion yet? This is probably going to keep going.
You haven't noticed a pattern.
Yeah, for you to get along with this lady, you're going to have to close the book and realize this is just the way it is.
Thinking Like Jesus, the Psychology of a Faithful Disciple is the book. Here's my problem. Okay, so more than anything, even more than getting it myself, I want my kids to understand this, to see that thinking like Jesus is not like thinking like the world. It's not like thinking like most of what you'll hear on Oprah, not to pick on anybody, but it's that thinking like Jesus is different. How do I communicate that to my children without my children having had enough of me?
You want the good news or the bad news?
Well, I'll take them both. Go ahead. Just lay it on me.
Well, the bad news is you better think that way somewhat yourself, or you're not going to be able to impart it.
Yeah,
okay?
Right.
That's the first thing. Well, you know, honey, your grandma is really a toxic individual. She's really obnoxious, and she can be so easily offensive, and I understand how you get hurt by her. Well, there you go. Okay, that's going to make the kid deal with grandma. Instead of saying, honey, grandma can say a lot of things that can hurt you, and you don't have to be hurt by what she says. She says things, and sometimes she doesn't think about them, and she can be that way, and we got to love her anyway. So the good news is, with a kid, they're more malleable. You sit down and talk with a kid about this kind of stuff, and they are easier to imbibe this stuff than a person in therapy. Because a person in therapy's got long-standing habits,
right?
Long-standing attitudes that are just sometimes locked in cement. But a little kid, a 5, 8, 10, 12-year-old kid, notice I didn't mention any teenagers because they all think they're smarter than we are anyway, but a little kid, you explain it to them this way enough times, it sinks in a lot easier to them than it does to your spouse or to your mother or to your obnoxious brother-in-law.
I see. I got to warn you to stop insinuating that my mother might be an unpleasant person. She listens every day, Dr. Ray. So
Oh, nice move, Si. Okay. If
Now
one
I tell
fell
you.
swoop, you negate everything I've said. I don't want to say this. I'm going to get you in trouble, but you asked me before the show.
Oh, come on
right?
now.
If you bring these things up, my mother listens, and she needs to hear this.
Oh, man. I thought I would get the last word in. What a fool am I to think that I could outdo Ray Garendi. Now I have to go home to my mother and explain to her Dr. Ray was kidding. Right, Dr. Ray?
Well,
right?
here's
right?
the truth, Si.
Yes.
Here is the truth.
Yeah.
I got this anonymous letter, and it said, my son is a host of a very popular Catholic call-in show.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please send him your book? Because I really think that a lot of the way that I raised him fell short in some of the ways he thinks. Could you send him your book, and maybe he can learn something? I don't know who the woman was, but... last name began with a K or something like that. I forget. I don't know what it was.
Oh, I was going to say it was probably Mrs. Usher, Jerry Usher's mom, but okay, well, I'll go with that. Hey, I've been ignoring callers. I forgot that we're a call-in show because I have so much fun talking to Dr. A. He just said the word call-in show, and I was like, oh, yeah, callers. So when we come back, I'll get to the callers. But I want to let you know, last fall we distributed more than 100,000 copies of Why We're Catholic, thanks to listeners like you who bought a case or two, or some cases 3, and handed them out to friends, family, even strangers. And with Advent right around the corner, we thought, well, let's make that even bigger deal. We got more books on sale for bulk prices now. Books priced up to $16.95 now can be had for as low as $1 or $5 per copy, depending on the book. Books like Why We're Catholic, Made This Way, Delivered, Restored, Persuasive Pro-Life, all of our 20 Answers titles. It's a great way to share your faith and save some money while you're doing it. Just go to Bulk Book Specials at shop.catholic.com. Get your books in bulk today.
Your questions, Catholic Answers, live.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com. EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
Yeah, first I love the show, but I just wanted to call to encourage that previous caller who called about the Latin Mass and just encourage him to keep giving it a try, and especially try to meet some folks outdoors and his wife meet some people, and that does make that experience so much better. And thank you for your historical background, and it was a good interpretation of the history.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to all of our listeners, especially my mom. The number is 888-31-TRUTH, and I have been unjust to callers, so we'll go now to Matt in Marshall, Minnesota. That's a lot of alliteration. Matt in Marshall, Minnesota, watching on YouTube. Matt, your question for Dr. Ray.
Yeah, there's a lot of M's. So yeah, I was just going through Facebook, within the hour, and I came across a story about an atheist group shut down a prayer session either before or after a football game because one of the coach's daughters was sick, so they decided to have a prayer for her, but naturally the atheist group didn't like that and shut it down, citing the First Amendment. And I just read that and got really offended. I didn't say anything or type anything because I know nobody cares what I think, but I was mad about it and I was offended about it, and I just went on a little monologue in my head about it. And then you came on the show and I was listening, and I kind of thought to myself, well, when is it okay to be offended? Am I wrong to be mad at this atheist group for shutting down a prayer session? I don't know. What's your perspective on that, I guess?
Most of the time, Matt, when we get offended, it's because we believe somebody's done something personally to us. You saw injustice. You saw someone attempting to squash another person's freedom of religion, freedom of speech, basically shutting them up. And understandably, you said, this is wrong. This is offensive. I think that if you take it a step further and say, I as a Christian take personal offense to this, Well, I suppose you could do that, but all you do is agitate yourself. I have another book on anger, and I talk about righteous anger versus right-filled anger. Righteous anger is kind of like our Lord's anger when he was angry at wrongs or hurts and injustices done to others. Right-filled anger more often tends to be when we get all upset because we take something personally, that this was somehow aimed at me. I think that's one way to separate the two.
What do you think of that, Matt?
I see, yes. No, I appreciate that. I was hoping you'd say something along those lines. And yes, I totally agree.
Wait a minute, Matt. You were hoping I'd say something along those lines. You already knew the answer. You just wanted me to stamp it.
Well, I thought you might say, well, it almost sounded like saying being offended is wrong, period. Don't be offended, quit whining. And I thought, sometimes it's okay to be offended, isn't it, though?
Well, yeah, but 80% of our offense is personal. It really is. Okay? Yeah. I spend a lot more time being upset and irate over things that I think have been done directly at me, oftentimes I misinterpret it, than I do looking at injustice and wrongs and immorality in the world and against the Lord's people.
Right. Macro versus micro. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I see your point.
You love those M words, Matt, from Marshall, Minnesota. Macro, micro. I can do M words too. Thanks for the call, Matt. I do appreciate it. I have to say though, Dr. Ray, I don't. You tell me if this is a bad strategy. You said, sometimes when we're avoiding toxic people, what we're really doing is we just don't want to behave in a Christian way. We don't want to have to go through that, and so we just kind of put the person out. But I actually find, and maybe you'll find this shocking, I find a lot of news reporting and commentary to be toxic. So I've started to just ignore it, and I feel better because
here's the difference.
Okay, go ahead.
The difference. Si, you don't have to have those people in your life.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
It's like the mail carrier. Okay, he's obnoxious. All right, I'll collect the mail after he's down the street. You don't have to have this ushy-gushy love relationship. When I talk about toxic people, I'm talking about people that are in the center circle of your life.
Yeah.
Deep friends, relatives, co-workers, boss, that you have to deal with. You don't have an option here. Okay? So therefore, you need to stretch as far as you can to get along with them, and in so doing, you'll probably reduce them from the label toxic to unpleasant or difficult.
Right.
There's the difference. Yeah, you look at the news, and I just want to throw stuff at the television. Said it's so obnoxious, some of the stuff these folks are saying and doing. Okay.
Right.
So I find that I can avoid them. It's just unpleasant and unnecessary, but I'm not shunning them from my life as I would someone that the Lord says, "Hey, Ray, this is your adult son who's 23 years old. You better be real careful about writing him off."
Right. Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, because when the caller says, that sense of being offended by that action that he read about, I don't know if I'm copping out by saying, there's only so many things I can be worried about. If I'm watching the news and it's just upsetting me. I mean, then maybe I'm not going to do it.
Well, you got to spend your emotional energy in stuff you can control.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
If there are people in my family that I don't relate to well, then my emotional energy has to figure out, okay, how can I be at least a pleasant, civil person to them?
Yeah.
And ignore an awful lot of the way they act or the way they behave because it's just obnoxious, or they pick a fight over politics, and I'm going to try to avoid that. I got to somehow. It doesn't mean I like being around them, and it doesn't mean that I would choose to spend free time with them. It just means that in the circumstances of family life, I got to work a lot harder to get along with people that are if my mother says, "Ray, you got to get along with your brother. You're both my sons." And I say, "Mom, I don't really care what you think. He's obnoxious. I don't want him around. He's unpleasant. And if you have a birthday party and he comes, I don't."
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. See, the other problem is this. Okay, let me draw an illustration here. Do you know the people who are most likely to walk out of my office in anger?
Bill collectors?
Well, Si, you're not going to want to hear this. People who see themselves as a far superior Christian to their spouse.
Oh.
Because if, for example, they come in and they're very upset at their spouse because their spouse does not embrace religion like they do.
Uh-huh.
And I really have to be gentle about this. I gently try to point out that, well, you operate under a different system. You know, your system says forgive. Your system says watch what you say. He doesn't or she doesn't operate out of that system. And so they think I'm blaming them. And their attitude is, wait a minute, I'm the Christian here. Why are you questioning my conduct? I've had a couple of them just crumple up a check and throw it down on the desk and walk out.
I wish people that were mad at me would throw a check on the desk before they walk out, but that doesn't happen. I guess that comes with an advanced degree. Al in Pennsylvania is next. Al's listening on the EWTN app. Al, you are on with Dr. Ray Guarendi. Your question, please.
Hi, Dr. Ray.
Hey, Al.
Or Sai and Dr. Oki. Thank you so much for taking my call. I'm a big fan, and I look forward to get your book and read it, hopefully, one day at least. So, just in brief, you were talking about assertiveness, and I'm familiar with these terms because I studied psychology. Anyway, I don't want to get into that too much. So, you said something about about righteous anger, which sometimes I think you agree, sometimes it could be at something unrighteous done to us, if that makes sense. Like, let's say people talk about if someone is significantly violated, let's say the Me Too movement or whatever, or your rights are really violated, you can't speak, you can't be righteously anger, although this violation at yourself. So my question is that where to draw the line, or do you have a criteria to have an imbalance when to speak? Let's say I have an example, which I think maybe you're an answer to my prayer to the Holy Spirit for wisdom. A coworker angered me or has been treating me in a disrespectful way recently. So should I speak or not? Am I going to create a chaos? Is it personal? And I prayed about it. And I'm planning, maybe I'll talk today because I work overnight or not, and maybe I should stay silent or give it a time. Maybe she didn't mean, maybe.
Al, I'm going to just interrupt you to let Dr. Ray respond because we're so limited on time. But how do you make an evaluation like that? When to speak, when not to speak in a work situation like that?
You exercise judgment. If you've spoken before, and most people have, they know how it turned out. So if you recognize that part of being difficult as that person is they're also defensive. And they are also, who, me? I'm not like that. So if you recognize that, you realize that whatever you speak up is going to make it worse. Now, Al was saying something like, well, should I move to another shift? Should I get away from this guy? I always tell people, do you want to stay on the shift you're on? Well, yes, I would prefer it. Would you stay on it if he wasn't there? Yes, I would. Well, then maybe a way to deal with this is to find out why you're getting upset over this guy. You take him as putting you down? He can't put you down if you don't take it as a put down. He can say what he wants, so what? Or he's critical, or he says snarky remarks about your Catholic faith. All right, go in one ear and out the other because I'm not going to let you get to me the way you've been getting to me the last 3 years. If you can do some of that, you can basically stay on the shift you're on, and this guy doesn't have that kind of power over you anymore.
Al, we'll have to leave it there because you can probably hear the music playing. I appreciate that call, Al, and you'll be in our prayers. The new book from Dr. Ray Guarendi is Thinking Like Jesus. I guess if you're going to find somebody to think like, you couldn't find anybody better than that. The Psychology of a Faithful Disciple. You can get it from EWTN Publishing, probably just about anywhere where good Catholic books are sold. Dr. Ray Guarendi, thank you very much for a very fine hour.
Cy, it's always a pleasure.
It is for me. It certainly is. Even despite being corrected and coming to the realization I need to make actual improvements in my life, I like to avoid all that. But you get me right through that, and I really enjoyed the book too. So I appreciate the time, appreciate the book, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today on Catholic Answers Live.